John, we are honored to welcome to the program the Republican from California's 25th District and the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, Representative Buck McKEON, is with us. John, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
I tell you what, Chairman McKEON, always a pleasure to have you on our show. Thank you so much for joining us today in D.C. and throughout the state of Virginia.
Thank you for having me, and thanks for the great job you're doing in Virginia.
Well, sir, we appreciate that. You're in a position right now where you've got a bird's eye view of what these defense cuts are going to mean to the military. What is the plan right now for the Republican caucus to figure out how to deal with the oncoming sequestration cuts which go into play tomorrow?
Yesterday in our conference, we had there was a very good tone, a very good meeting. Our leadership said that the appropriators had done a lot of work, and they are going to bring to the floor, hopefully next week, a continuing resolution that will fund the government through the end of the fiscal year, September 30th. And wrapped into that continuing resolution would be the Defense Appropriations Bill and McKEON and Veterans Affairs. So this would, although it does not fix the sequestration problem for the military, it does go a long way to helping them deal with the current problem this year.
So as far as it sounds like what you've just said, Mr. Chairman, is that's kind of the bigger picture going forward. Talk to us about the short-term implementation of these mandated sequestration reductions. What is your caucus's concept right now of dealing with this?
Well, this has all happened so fast and it's so big that under Secretary Gates, the defense was cut $100 billion. Then the chiefs, after a speech by the president where he said he wanted to cut $400 billion out of defense, we passed the Budget Control Act, which cut $1 trillion out of spending, and half of that came out of the military. So that is being implemented starting with the fiscal 13 years. So this year, we have cut $50 billion out of defense. Then the sequestration, when the super committee wasn't able to complete their work and find additional savings out of the mandatory side, which is where the real problem is,
right,
that reverted back to what we call sequestration kicking in, cutting another $1 trillion plus, and again, half of it coming out of defense. And that kicks in tomorrow, was delayed from January 1st. And that places, after the $487 billion cuts, another $500 billion on top of them. So there's been a lot thrown at our defense community in a very short time that's all going to come home to roost starting tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, in your judgment, if these cuts go through as mandated, is it going to hamper America's military readiness?
No question. And that's my biggest concern, because it's already started. Knowing that this was coming, our military leaders at bases where the troops are being trained, that comes out of their operating maintenance budget, and that is going to be cut hugely because they now we're halfway through the year, so they have just 6 months left to make up for a year's savings, and they've been spending money for 6 months. Well, these base commanders that are responsible for this know that this was coming, and so they've started pulling back. So the troops that are out training now aren't getting to fire their weapons as much. They're not getting the flying hours. They're not getting the training that they were getting a year ago. So that the troops in Afghanistan right now have more training than the ones that are going to replace them. And that is readiness, and that is, when you start cutting the training, you're talking about lives.
Chairman McKEON, do you favor or are you open to President Obama and the Democrats' proposed compromise that we solve this problem by a combination of spending reductions and increasing taxes?
You know, the first thing the president comes up with is cut defense and increase taxes. And he says we should have a balanced approach. But he's taking all of the cuts, all of the savings out of the discretionary spending. If you eliminated all discretionary spending, totally eliminated the Department of Defense, totally eliminated education, roads, FBI, Homeland Security, everything that we vote on every year to fund, if you eliminated all of it, we would still be running a deficit of $500 billion a year, because the real problem is on the mandatory side. And that will continue no matter what we cut unless we bring that into the discussion and address that. And if we don't do that, we will never solve the problem. And if we don't do that, Social Security and Medicare are going to go bankrupt in about 10 to 15 years. So it's a double-edged sword. And the president, when he talks about a balanced approach, does not even bring that into the equation. And that's the biggest part of it.
What happened to the idea of being able to put forth a single measure to allow the military to move line items around in order to cover what they need to either sustain or increase their readiness as needed?
Well, that was the position that we talked about last night in the Republican conference when we met. And the leadership and the appropriators have proposed this plan that would do just that. And we would pass the defense appropriations, which gives them the ability to eliminate programs that we passed our Defense Authorization Act in December. And because we're working on the continuing resolution to this point, that does not go into effect. Once they pass the appropriation bills, then it gives them the authority to do what we said in that bill, and that's eliminate programs that are no longer needed and start programs that are necessary. Gives them a lot more flexibility, and they can move funds around. They just have to come to us for the authority to reprogram, which we will be happy to help them with.
Mr. Chairman, does that measure include the ability to, or language, to make that permanent so that in the future, if there is another idea like sequester, the military will not be the target or the, shall we say, the ammunition in the leverage of these negotiations, essentially taking the military budget off the table for future ideas like this?
No, it does not. All it does is helps the problem right now. And for this fiscal year ending September 30th, a Congress cannot bind another Congress. So there's always the ability to get into that particular problem. What we have to do is change the hearts and minds of people. They have to understand that the Constitution says that our sole or major responsibility is to defend this nation, and I take that very seriously, and we do that with our military, and it gets taken for granted because they've done such a great job. We have the best military that's ever been on this earth, but you can decimate it very quickly. And my concern is the readiness and the ability to project power around the world, which protects our interests and our allies' interests, and then the workforce. I mean, the way we're treating the workforce through this sequestration is like you can turn it on and turn it off from day to day, and it doesn't work that way.
It's a shame that the military's become a political toy, sir. John?
It sure is.
Chairman McKEON, you laid out a very common sense approach to letting the Department of Defense find the reductions in spending that they need within their own line items. Anybody that doesn't even understand the details of this would say, well, that makes sense. However, the president is opposed to that. Do you feel that President Obama right now is politically grandstanding this issue?
Well, you know, as I see it, and of course I'm sure I'm biased, but the the election was supposed to be a deciding factor, and then you spend 4 years governing. But the president came out, said, I won, and I get my way on everything, or I'm going to take my marbles and go home. And the campaign never stopped. He's been running around the country just like he did in September and October leading up to the election. He just sent out his surrogates to raise another $50 million to use to get his agenda through. I mean, there are things being thrown at us constantly. Today we'll be voting on the Violence Against Women Act, which is a good thing. I can't imagine anybody that doesn't want to see violence against women stop, but there are always people put things in the bill that make them controversial. They're running ads against me in my district on gun control. We've got illegal immigration, and overarching all of that is what we're doing to our defense and our people in the military and our people that build the things that our military needs. It just is, at some point, we ought to take a breath and govern instead of just constantly be campaigning and wanting to raise taxes.
Chairman, we've only got about 20 seconds. What's the president's real objective?
Destroy the Republican Party, take back the House, and then have his last 2 years unfettered to totally implement his agenda.
Sir, we thank you for your time. We've been speaking to Representative Buck McKEON, beautiful 25th District of California. He is the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, and we can't thank you enough for the insight, sir. Best to you, and we appreciate your time this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.